Julia never imagined her own sister would one day destroy everything she built, but that was where her story truly began. She had married Adam just 8 months ago, and for the first time in her life, peace finally felt possible. His mother, Grace, treated Julia with warmth she had never received at home. Julia's family lived modestly. Her father Samuel sold insurance, her mother Susan worked as a school secretary, and her younger sister Maya floated through life without consequences. "You're the responsible one," Susan always said, while Maya was treated like she could do no wrong. When Julia and Adam got engaged, Grace stunned them with a beautiful Victorian home worth nearly $700,000. Julia tried to decline, but Grace gently closed her hand around the keys. "This is my gift to your future," she said softly. "Build a strong life here." Julia felt truly valued for once. At the wedding, her parents acted proud. Samuel shook Grace's hand so often it became awkward, and Susan kept saying how blessed Julia was. Maya smiled on the surface, but her eyes wandered, studying every detail like the house already belonged to her. For 2 weeks after the wedding, Julia lived in a dream. She and Adam returned from their honeymoon in Greece to find the house spotless, decorated, and ready for their new chapter. They laughed through late evenings, imagining children and a future full of peace. Then one evening Julia's phone rang. It was Susan, and her voice carried the same sharp tone Julia had feared as a child. "We need to talk," she said. "Your father and I are coming over. We're bringing Maya." Julia felt her stomach clench. "When?" she asked. "1 hour," Susan replied coldly. When Julia opened the door, Samuel, Susan, and Maya entered with an energy that felt carefully rehearsed. Samuel cleared his throat dramatically. "We've been thinking about your situation here." Julia frowned. "What situation?" Maya stepped forward boldly, eyeing the home as if she were measuring for new furniture. "This place is huge," she said. "Too big for just you two." Adam crossed his arms. "We're not giving our home to anyone." Susan leaned in with a forced emotional expression. "Maya's lease ends soon. She needs help. Family supports family." Maya smirked. "Stop acting better than us. You didn't earn this house." For a moment Julia felt that old familiar pressure. To apologize, to give in, to fix everything alone. But Adam spoke firmly first. "Grace gave this house to us," he said. "Not to your daughter." Susan gasped in outrage. "So you think you're too good for family now?" Julia finally snapped. "No. I'm done being bullied for having a life of my own." The argument dragged on for 2 exhausting hours filled with guilt, shouting, and manipulation. Maya kept repeating, "Just give me the house already." Finally, Julia opened the front door. "Get out," she said quietly. And everything changed. After Julia shut the door, the house went silent for a long moment. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard, trying to steady herself. Adam placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said softly. Julia nodded, but her chest felt tight. "They won't stop Adam. You know they won't." He sighed. "Then we prepare." And he was right. By the next morning, the harassment had already started. Calls before sunrise. Long guilt-filled messages from Susan. Angry texts from Samuel. And from Maya, endless pictures of overpriced apartments with captions like, "Suffering while my sister lives in luxury." The situation grew worse every day. Maya posted vague quotes online about fake family and ungrateful siblings, and her friends cheered her on. At church, Susan painted herself as a heartbroken mother abandoned by her daughter. Samuel even showed up at Adam's workplace once, trying to convince his boss that Julia was unstable. When Adam told her, Julia stood frozen. "They're trying to destroy us," she whispered. Adam nodded. "They want control. That's all this is." She took a deep breath. "Then we need to protect ourselves." Adam agreed. "Start documenting everything." And that night they created a folder. The folder grew quickly. Screenshots, voicemails, social media posts, all showing a clear pattern of harassment. Julia couldn't believe how far her family was willing to go. Then one afternoon her cousin Chloe called. "Julia, I need to warn you," she said urgently. "Maya has been telling people she's moving into your house next month." Julia froze. "What?" Chloe continued. "She's using your address for mail. She's already talking to potential roommates. She's charging people deposits." Julia felt her skin go cold. Deposits? For my house. Chloe sighed. Julia. She's telling people the house already belongs to her. After Julia hung up the phone, she told Adam everything. His expression hardened. This is fraud, he said. She's committing actual crimes now. Julia felt her voice shake. My parents know. Chloe said Samuel was talking about retiring early once they moved into the house. Susan wants to quit her job. Adam stared at her. They plan to live off you. Julia nodded slowly. They've been planning it for months. Adam didn't hesitate. We're calling Grace. When Grace arrived 2 hours later, Julia explained everything. Grace listened quietly, then said, This ends now. I will handle them personally. The next day, Grace invited Samuel, Susan, and Maya to lunch at her country club. Julia and Adam sat beside her as silent witnesses. The room glittered with chandeliers and polished hardwood floors. Samuel looked nervous. Susan looked hopeful. Maya looked excited, as if she were about to receive keys to the estate. Grace opened the conversation gracefully. I understand there has been confusion about the house I gifted Julia and Adam. Susan quickly replied, We were only discussing family helping family, nothing unreasonable. Grace smiled politely. Wonderful. Then let's discuss facts. And the table instantly fell silent. Grace rested her hands on the table calmly. Julia tells me Maya believes she should have the house, she said. Maya immediately leaned forward. Well, yes. It's a 3-bedroom house and there are only 2 people. It just makes sense. Grace raised an eyebrow. Fascinating. And you believe sense gives you ownership. Maya blinked, caught off guard. Samuel cleared his throat. Mrs. Grace, there may have been misunderstandings. We only thought Maya needed help and they have extra space. Grace smiled politely. Space is not ownership. Effort is not ownership. Entitlement definitely is not ownership. Maya flushed bright red. Grace continued. Maya, dear, what is your profession again? Maya lifted her chin. I work at an exclusive boutique. Part-time for now. Grace nodded. And you turned down a promotion recently, correct? Maya froze. How did you? Grace interrupted gently. Julia tells me things. We are close. The temperature at the table dropped. Then Grace pulled out a folder. Now inside this folder are several documents. This is the deed, which clearly lists the trust's ownership and Julia and Adam's lifetime rights. She slid it toward Samuel. This, Samuel, is a cease and desist letter addressed to Maya. Samuel blinked. Susan gasped. Maya whispered, A cease and desist? For what? Grace folded her hands. For representing yourself as having ownership over property that does not belong to you. Including showing photos of the home, using the address as your own, and, most concerning, collecting deposits from people for rooms that do not exist. Maya went pale. I didn't, Grace cut in sharply. This club has security cameras. My home has cameras. And so does Julia's property. We have footage of you visiting the house multiple times, entering restricted areas, and attempting to meet contractors without permission. Nobody spoke. Susan finally broke the silence. Grace, you have to understand. Maya is struggling. We're just trying to help her. Grace shook her head. Helping is not the same as stealing, Susan. Adam stared at Maya. You've been pretending you live in our house? Maya snapped. Well, it should be mine. You two don't even have kids yet. Julia's jaw tightened. So you destroy relationships because you're jealous? Maya crossed her arms. It's unfair. You married into money and think you deserve everything. Grace leaned forward. What she deserves is peace. What you deserve is consequences for your behavior. Grace stood up slowly, her presence filling the room. Lunch is over, she said. Julia and Adam will keep their home. Maya will not set foot on the property again. Any continued harassment will result in legal action. You are all dismissed. Susan looked shocked. You can't end a family relationship like this. Grace replied calmly, You already did that yourselves. Maya muttered something under her breath, but when Grace turned her eyes toward her, Maya fell silent. Julia and Adam followed Grace out of the dining hall, leaving Samuel, Susan, and Maya frozen in disbelief. For 2 weeks, things became strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, no online posts. Julia almost allowed herself to breathe again. But peace rarely lasted with her family. Soon the phone rang again, this time her Uncle Greg. "You embarrassed your parents at that club," he said angrily. "People don't forget things like that." Julia stared at the phone. "They tried to steal my home," she said. Greg snapped back, "Family deserves respect." Then he hung up. Later, her Aunt Denise called crying, saying Julia had betrayed generations of family loyalty. The pattern was clear. They were turning everyone against her. One afternoon, Adam came home early. "Samuel was waiting in the parking lot at my job," he said, rubbing his forehead. Julia's heart dropped. What did he want? Adam sighed. "He wants us to make things right. He said making your mother cry has consequences." Julia sat down slowly. "Consequences? What is that supposed to mean?" Adam shook his head. "I told him to leave the property or I'd call security." He drove off. Julia clenched her fists. "They're escalating again." Adam nodded. "And Maya keeps posting comments online about karma and lessons people need to learn." That night Chloe called again. Her voice trembled. "Julia, you need to know what Maya said yesterday." Julia braced herself. "Go ahead." Chloe inhaled. "She said something big is coming. Something that will make you understand what you really deserve." She sounded happy about it. Julia felt the room spin. "Something big." Chloe whispered. "She said karma sometimes needs a push." After the call ended, Julia told Adam everything. Adam paced the living room. "This feels dangerous now." Julia nodded slowly. "We need protection." Adam grabbed his phone. "We're calling Grace again. Tonight." Grace arrived with her security chief, Marcus. She listened closely as Julia repeated everything that had happened. Marcus spoke first. "We need increased security immediately. Additional cameras, motion sensors, perimeter checks." Julia swallowed. "Do you think Maya would actually try something?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Desperate people make reckless choices." Grace placed a hand on Julia's shoulder. "You are not alone this time. We're strengthening the house and we are watching every angle of this situation." Julia exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Grace smiled softly. "Family protects each other. Real family." For the next 3 weeks nothing happened. Security cameras showed only neighbors walking their dogs and delivery trucks passing by. The quiet almost felt peaceful. Julia and Adam even allowed themselves a weekend away when Grace invited them to her lakeside cabin for rest. They left the house locked, alarms activated and cameras running. They returned Sunday evening expecting calm, until Julia opened the door. A thick, damp smell hit her instantly. Water stains covered the floors. The ceiling in the living room sagged. Hardwood planks buckled. Julia stepped back trembling. "Adam." Someone flooded the house. Adam rushed inside, stopping beside Julia as they stared at the destruction. The kitchen tiles were cracked and lifted, furniture soaked and photographs from their wedding warped and ruined. The dining room ceiling had completely collapsed, chunks of plaster covering the antique table Grace had gifted them. Julia covered her mouth, shaking uncontrollably. "This wasn't an accident," she whispered. Adam knelt to the floor and touched a swollen wooden board. "The water ran for hours. Days maybe." Julia looked at the hallway. Who would do something like this? But she already knew the answer. Adam whispered, "Maya." Grace arrived within 20 minutes, her face turning cold as she surveyed the damage. Marcus walked beside her with a flashlight and a camera, inspecting every corner. "Structural damage," he muttered, taking photos. "At least 36 hours of water flow. Maybe more." Julia felt her chest tighten. "So this was deliberate?" Marcus nodded. "Whoever did this forced entry through the basement door. Not a break-in mistake. This was planned." Adam clenched his jaw. "How did they bypass the alarm?" Marcus pointed to the old exterior basement door. "This entry wasn't yet added to the system loop. They knew exactly where to strike." The police arrived shortly after, documenting everything and marking the forced entry. One officer examined the damaged wood around the basement door. "Someone pried this open," he said. "And I doubt it's a stranger." Julia stood silently, her hands shaking. Grace placed an arm around her. "We will handle this," she said firmly. The officer continued, "We'll need to check your security footage." Marcus nodded. "I have a copy ready." They moved to the living room, stepping around puddles and debris, and Marcus opened his laptop. Julia wasn't sure she was ready to see what the cameras captured. Marcus pulled up the footage from 2 nights earlier. At 1:53 a.m., Maya's car appeared on the front camera. She sat in the driver's seat for 8 full minutes, staring at the house. Then she drove away. Interesting, the officer said. Suspicious timing. Marcus clicked to the next angle. At 2:14 a.m., the back camera caught someone walking toward the basement door. The figure was hooded, but the height, build, and walking style were unmistakable. Julia whispered, "It's her, isn't it?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Matches her movements exactly. And there's no reason for her to be here at that hour." The insurance investigator came early the next morning. After reviewing the footage and damage, he spoke quietly. "This is no accident. It's targeted sabotage." Julia felt the word crush her chest. Sabotage. Grace squeezed her hand. "We're going to fight this, Julia." Then Julia's phone rang. It was Chloe. "Put me on speaker," she said urgently. When Julia did, Chloe continued, "Maya called me yesterday while drunk. She said, and I quote, 'Sometimes karma needs a push.' Then she laughed about you learning what really matters." Julia felt her knees weaken. Adam looked at her. "That's a confession." The investigator leaned forward. "Do you have that conversation recorded?" Chloe replied, "Yes. I thought it was strange, so I recorded halfway through. I'm sending it now." A minute later, the audio played through the living room. Maya's slurred voice filled the destroyed room. "They don't deserve that house. When they see what happens, they'll understand life isn't fair." Julia closed her eyes tightly. The investigator wrote notes rapidly. "This isn't circumstantial anymore. This is a clear pattern. Social media threats, audio confession, camera footage, forced entry, and motive." Adam whispered, "She ruined our home out of jealousy." Later that day, Daisy showed the investigator Maya's recent social media posts. One stood out. A message posted at 3:47 a.m. the same night of the flooding. "Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. Maybe a reality check will teach them." The investigator screenshot it immediately. "This," he said, "combined with the audio and the camera footage is powerful evidence. I'll be recommending a full criminal investigation." Julia felt her throat tighten. "Criminal." The investigator looked at her kindly. "Julia, the damage is over $200,000. This is a felony case." 2 days later, the detective assigned to the case called Julia and said the words she never thought she would hear. "We're filing charges." Julia held the phone tightly. "What charges?" "Felony property damage with signs of premeditation. And depending on the prosecutor, possibly burglary." Julia sat down slowly. "This is my sister." The detective answered gently, "I know. But family doesn't excuse crimes of this scale. Maya crossed a line that has legal consequences." Adam listened from across the room, his expression heavy but steady. "Julia," he said softly, "she did this to herself. Not you." Grace's attorney moved quickly, filing for restraining orders against Maya and formal harassment warnings against Samuel and Susan. "Their interference and threats must stop," the attorney said firmly. Repairs on the house were estimated at $220,000 and would take months. Julia walked through the destroyed rooms one last time before the construction began, tears streaming down her face. "It was our home," she whispered. Adam wrapped an arm around her. "It will be again. And it will be stronger." Grace nodded. "And protected from anyone who tries to take advantage of you." For 4 long months, Julia and Adam lived in a furnished rental arranged by Grace. They visited the house weekly, watching the slow rebuild. Stripped walls, replaced beams, new wiring, fresh floors. Lawyers handled the case while Julia focused on healing. Maya initially refused to accept guilt, but once her lawyer showed her the evidence file, camera timestamps, audio confessions, social media posts, contractor inquiries, her denial collapsed. Facing up to 5 years in prison, she accepted a plea deal: probation, restitution, and a permanent restraining order. Julia read the court transcript later, her heart breaking but relieved. Justice had begun. Julia didn't attend Maya's plea hearing, but she read every word of the transcript. Maya had to stand before the judge and admit she deliberately damaged the home out of anger and entitlement. She had to say she felt she deserved the house more than her sister. The judge asked, "Do you understand this was a serious crime?" Maya whispered, "Yes." Julia felt a painful mix of sadness and closure. Adam rubbed her back gently. "She chose this," he reminded her. Grace added softly, "This was the only way she would ever face consequences." Julia nodded, tears silently falling. Part of Maya's plea required her to pay restitution, $47,000 over several years. Julia knew Maya had never held a full-time job for long. "She'll be paying for this for years," Adam said one evening as they signed final repair documents. "Maybe that's what accountability looks like," Julia replied. Samuel and Susan tried calling a few times after the plea, but Grace's attorney immediately shut down every attempt with updated cease and desist protections. When Samuel tried reaching out through extended family, those relatives received similar warnings. Julia realized something important. Her peace had to come before their approval. When the house was finally restored, Julia walked through the rooms slowly. Fresh paint covered the walls, new hardwood gleamed under the lights, and the dining room ceiling looked stronger than before. Grace walked beside her. "This is yours now," Grace said. "Truly yours." Julia nodded, feeling a weight lift. Grace had the trust paperwork updated so the home could never be claimed or touched by outsiders again. Layered protections, new security systems, and recorded ownership ensured Julia and Adam were safe. "Thank you," Julia whispered. Grace smiled softly. "Family protects each other. You deserve security and peace." One afternoon at the grocery store, Julia turned down an aisle and froze. Samuel stood near the apples, looking older, his shoulders slumped. He saw her and approached slowly. "Julia," he said quietly. She didn't speak. He took a shaky breath. "Your mother and I are separated. Maya works 2 jobs now. Everything fell apart after everything." Julia stayed silent. Samuel continued, "We thought we deserved something. We convinced ourselves you owed us. We were wrong." Julia swallowed. "You hurt me deeply." Samuel nodded. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say it out loud." Julia stood still, her fingers wrapped around the shopping cart handle. For a moment she saw her father as a tired, broken man rather than the demanding, entitled parent she had known. "I hope you find peace," she finally said. Samuel blinked, tears gathering. "But not with us," she added gently. "That chapter is closed." He nodded slowly. "Take care of yourself, Julia." He walked away quietly, not looking back. Julia watched him go, feeling no anger, only clarity. Some relationships were healthier left behind, even if they were rooted in blood. She exhaled deeply and continued her shopping. When Julia arrived home, Adam found her sitting in the nursery they had prepared. Soft yellow paint covered the walls and tiny clothes were folded neatly in drawers. "You're quiet," he said, kneeling beside her. She told him about seeing Samuel at the store. Adam listened carefully. "How do you feel?" Julia looked around the warm, peaceful room. "Like it's finally over," she said. "Really over." Adam smiled gently. "This house survived everything. And so did you." Julia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Our daughter will grow up knowing love, not entitlement. Respect, not manipulation. We'll teach her that." 2 months later their daughter arrived, tiny, bright-eyed and perfect. They named her Emma. Grace cried openly when she held her granddaughter for the first time. "She is the beginning of a new chapter," Grace said softly. Julia smiled, exhausted but overflowing with joy. Adam kissed Emma's forehead. "She's our reminder of what truly matters." Julia knew he was right. Emma represented everything she had fought for: family built on respect, love free from demands, boundaries that protected peace. Julia watched Grace rock Emma gently and silently thanked the universe for giving her the family she deserved. Months passed, filled with late-night feedings, baby giggles, and quiet mornings on the restored wraparound porch. Julia sometimes drove past her parents' old home, but it looked smaller, dimmer, almost forgotten. She felt no triumph. "I don't want revenge," she told Adam one evening as they watched Emma sleep in her crib. "I just want peace." Adam nodded. "And you have it now." Julia touched Emma's tiny hand. "I'll teach her to give love freely but also to protect her boundaries fiercely. She'll never grow up thinking she owes anyone her happiness." Adam smiled. She already learned from the best. Grace visited often, bringing meals, tiny outfits, and stories from her own childhood. She treated Julia with kindness that felt healing. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room with Emma asleep on Grace's chest, Julia whispered, "Thank you for everything you've done." Grace looked up gently. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I protected my family. And now my family includes you." Julia felt her eyes sting. For the first time she realized she wasn't missing anything from her old family. She had gained something better. People who loved without expecting, supported without demanding, and honored her boundaries. Julia stood on the porch one quiet evening, Emma asleep in her arms, the warm breeze brushing her face. She looked at the restored home, the home Maya had tried to destroy but ultimately strengthened. As Adam stepped beside her, Julia whispered, "We won." He kissed her forehead. "Not by fighting them," he said, "but by living well." Julia smiled. He finally understood. Real victory wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was choosing peace over chaos, choosing love over fear, choosing her new family over the one that tried to break her. And in that moment she felt whole.